Welcome. Thank you all for being here. I'm Hope Coulter, Director of the Hendricks Murphy Foundation, Programs in Literature and Language. And I'd like to thank you for coming out today to this observance of Veterans Day. This event is co-sponsored by the Hendricks Murphy Foundation and the English Department of Hendricks. And Dr. Alex Vernon has been my co-coordinator. We'll start with the choir's anthem, and then we'll just go with the readers one at a time. Very, very easy flowing event. Thanks again.
In my heart, sequestered chambers lie true, stripped of poet's gloss. Words alone are vain and vacant, and my heart is mute.
In response to waking silence, memory summons half heard voices,
And my soul finds primal eloquence and wraps me in song, wraps me in song. If you would comfort me, sing me a lullaby. If you would win my heart, sing me a love song. If you would warn me and bring me to God, sing me a requiem. Sing it to heaven.
touching me, all love and passion, pain and pleasure,
Touching me, grief and comfort, love and passion, pain and pleasure.
Hi, my name's Everett Roddy, and I'm going to read a poem by Yusuf Komanyaka titled Losses. After Nam, he lost himself, not trusting his hands with loved ones. His girlfriend left, and now he scouts the edge of town, always with one ear cocked and ready to retreat, to blend with hills poised like a slip knot, becoming a noose. Unlike Punji stakes, his traps only snag the heart. Sometimes he turns in a circle until a few faces from Dak To track him down. A dress or scarf in the distance can nail him to a dogwood. Down below, to his left, from where the smog rises, a small voice reaches his ear somehow. No, never mind. He's halfway back, closer to a ravine, going deeper into saw vines, in behind White Cove, following his mind like a dark lover, away from car horns and backfire, where only days are stolen.
Hi, I'm Siwan Puerto, and I'm gonna read The War After the War from Deborah Greger. Where were the neighbors? Out of town? In my pajamas, I sat at my father's feet, in front of a squat, myopic television, the first in our neighborhood. On a screen the size of a salad plate, toy airplanes droned over quilted fields. Bouquet of jellyfish fell, parachutes abloom, grey toy soldiers drifting together, drifting apart, the way families do. But I didn't know that yet. I was 6 or 7. The TV was an aquarium. Steely fish fell from the belly of a plane, then burst into flame when they hit bottom. A doll house surrendered a wall, the way such houses do. Furniture hung onto wallpaper for dear life, down in the crumble of what had been a street. Woman tore brick from brick, filling a baby carriage. What was my young father, just a few years back from that war, looking for? The farm boy from Nebraska it'd been before it'd seen the cow. Next door, my brother and sister fought the battle of bedtime, bath by bath. Next door, in the living room, a two-town cowboy lay where he fell, too bow-legged to stand. Where was his horse? And the Indian would come apart at the waist. Where were his legs? To be found. A fireman, licorice red from helmet to boot, a coil of white rope slung over his arm, like a minced lifesaver, tried to help. A few inches of ladder crawled under a cushion, looking for crumbs. Between the sag of couch and the slump of rocker, past a pickle green soldier, a plastic foxhole, cocoa brown dug itself into the rug of no man's land and waited to trip my mother. Am I the oldest one here? In the theater, the air of expectation soured by mouse and mold in the dark, a constellation of postage stamps. The screen of cell phones glow. And then we were in Algiers, we were in Marseille. On foot, we fell in behind a ragged file of North African infantry. Further north than they'd ever been, we trudged, straight into the arms of the enemy. Winter 1944. Why did the French want to live in France? The youngest wondered while they hid, waiting capture by the cold. They relieved a dead German soldier of great coat and boots. Village by muddy village, they stole, shadow to shadow, trying to last until the Americans arrived. As if, just out of range of the lands, the open trucks of my father's unit would rumble over the rutted horizon. Good River Rifle, a far-sighted farm boy made company clerk because he'd learned to type in high school. How young he would look, not half my age, and no one to tell him he'll survive those months in Europe. He'll be spared the Pacific by Hiroshima. 50 years from then, one evening, from the drawer where he kept the TV remote, next to his flint knapping tools, he'd take out a small grey notebook and show his eldest daughter how, in pencil, in tiny hurried script, he kept the names of those who died around him.
From the 15th Air Force, 8th September 1944. My dear Mrs. Moore, I hope this letter will provide a little relief for the anxiety which you have experienced since you received the notice from the War Department informing you that your son, Staff Sergeant Thomas L. Moore, has been missing in action since July 30th, 1944. On the above date, the Flying Fortress, on which Tom was armorer gunner, attacked enemy-held airdromes at Budapest, Hungary. Over the target, the bombardment formation encountered an intense anti-aircraft barrage with which the enemy hoped to protect their positions. Your son's ship was severely damaged by the fire and it fell out of formation, losing altitude slowly. The pilot continued to keep the aircraft in controlled flight, and the order was issued for the crew to bail out. It is encouraging to note that all 10 parachutes opened. This represents the extent of our information at the present time, but you may be assured that if more details are received, the War Department will notify you immediately. Your son's position was an important one, and it made severe demands upon the courage and the skill of the man who filled it. I am proud to say that he did his job well and that our confidence in him was amply justified. Very sincerely yours, N.F. Twining, Major General. This letter from Stalag Luftwaffe. Dear Mom and Pop, please contact the local Red Cross chapter upon receipt of this letter. There you will be told just how to answer this letter and other information pertaining to my doings. I'm sure such information will do much to abate any needless worry that you may have. All members of our crew are safe. I am getting in good physical condition through lots of exercise and plenty of fresh air and sleep. Oh yes, I have quite a suntan. Here the fellows put on a beautiful church service. Tell friends and family hello for me. I'm returning to the university after the war, paid for by Thomas. To a swell Mom and Pop, I send my love. Love, Tom.
My name is Nathan Coulter. I was commissioned into the United States Marine Corps in 2014. I want to dedicate my reading today to both of my grandfathers who served in the United States Navy. Though they're no longer living today, they continue to guide me with their actions in life. My reading today comes from a speech given at a wartime ceremony to honor the fallen soldiers. I think you'll recognize it. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war, and we have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those here gave their lives so that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here have consecrated it. far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Abraham Lincoln, November 19, 1863.
I'd like to dedicate this reading to my father, who served in the U.S. Army, my father-in-law, Ed Brown, who also served in the U.S. Army, my uncles, Tom, Bill, and Paul Kelly, who served in the Army, Navy, and Navy, my uncles, Bob and Leonard Wilchin, who served in the Navy and Air Force, and to my friends who are in the military around the world. Today I want to talk to you briefly about Sergeant Day G. Turner, who was born in Berwick, Pennsylvania on September 2nd, 1921. He was drafted into the U.S. Army on just after his 22nd birthday. After basic training, he was assigned to B Company, which on July 1st, 1944, departed from the New York port of embarkation. His company landed on Utah Beach on August 5th and soon thereafter experienced combat in Europe. His combat happened in the Battle of the Bulge, which happened in 44 to 45, and noted as the last push by the Germans to try to force a different kind of treaty at the end of the war. The fighting was bitter because the winter was very harsh, and the men were really facing really bad conditions. On January 8th, Turner and his 8 other men were stationed outside of a farmhouse in this little town of Dahl, Luxembourg. Germans emerged from the woods and started approaching in the pre-dawn hours. I'm going to read a little bit from the story of what happened. When the German infantrymen emerged from the tree line and attempted to charge gently up the slopeside, Turner ordered his squad to open fire from the windows on the 2nd floor. At a range of less than 200 meters, Turner's outpost fired on the attacking German force with accurate fire from their M1 rifles. After being beaten back by accurate fire during the first attempt to capture the farm, the Germans tried again during the afternoon, but this time to deliver a concentration of smoke rounds and mortar fire. Turner knew that the hammer was about to fall, so he moved from room to room, redistributing ammunition and otherwise preparing for the squad for what was about to happen. When the Germans got close to the top of the hill, the mortar fire lifted and a new wave of German infantrymen closed in on the 8 surviving Americans. And from his position on the 2nd floor, Turner caught a brief glimpse through the smoke of the troops rushing toward the farmhouse. Turner shouldered his rifle and pulled the trigger, and the weapon gave him only 2 shots, and then it locked open. The 3 surviving German officers pushed the bodies of their 2 dead comrades aside and continued climbing the stairs toward Sergeant Turner with his now empty rifle. Out of ammunition, the 23-year-old staff sergeant reached for the closest object he could be used as a weapon, a nearby oil lamp. He hurled the lamp down the stairs at the 3 remaining attackers, and when it shattered, flames engulfed them, and they ran out of the building. A second group of attackers rushed through the door, and Turner tossed a hand grenade down the stairs at them and dashed to another room to shelter from the explosion. But the enemy kept coming after. 2 Germans stormed up the stairs and into the hallway, but Turner bayoneted both of them before they could raise their weapons. By that time, 5 of Turner's men had been wounded, and the enemy was beginning to surround the farm. But he refused to surrender. He ordered his remaining 2 unwounded soldiers to follow him and lead them out into the snow to keep fighting what was left of the German attacking force. When they emerged from the house, they collided with a squad of Germans who had just reached the farm. Still armed with the captured MP-40, Turner opened fire on the squad leader, killing him, and the others scattered. He reached for another grenade and tossed it around the corner of the house and charged after the explosion. Rounding the corner, he found 25 leaderless, stunned, and wounded enemy soldiers anxious to surrender. In many ways, Turner exemplified courage, devotion to duty, and sacrifice. He was in a place that he had never been, defending a people he had never met. But in the aftermath of the Battle of the Bulge, there are so many stories like Dave Turner's that dissolved in the bigger picture of a campaign that ultimately involved more than 600,000 U.S. Army soldiers. Turner's uniform resembles very closely the uniform to my right, which is actually my father's uniform, which I brought here today. However, the fight at the farm on January 8, 1945, a fight that hinged on the incredible actions of one man, is not familiar to us today. Nevertheless, Dave G. Turner's story is certainly worth remembering. He was, in the words of many, the epitome of the citizen soldier, and he was one of the finest American riflemen to serve during the Second World War. Thank you.
I'm going to read a short paragraph from this enormous novel by Tolstoy, a wonderful novel. As one of my students pointed out earlier this fall, we were reading some excerpts from War and Peace for my course, The Writer as Witness, and one of my students, in fact it was Siwan, pointed out that in this paragraph, this one description of a bridge, really the entire themes of peace and war for the whole novel are encapsulated. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the battle had been lost at all points. More than 100 cannon had already been captured by the French. Przewalski and his corps laid down their arms. Other columns, having lost about half their men, were retreating in disorderly, confused crowds. The remains of Langeron's and Doktorov's troops mixed together, crowded around the dams and banks of the ponds near the village of Augetz. After 5 o'clock, it was only at the dam of Augetz that the hot cannon fire of the French alone could be heard from numerous batteries lined up on the slopes of the Pratzen Heights and firing at our retreating troops. It was beginning to get dark. On the narrow dam of Augetz, on which for so many years an old miller in a cap used to sit peacefully with his fishing rods, while his grandson, with his shirt sleeves rolled up, fingered the silvery, trembling fish in the watering can. On this dam, over which for so many years Moravians in shaggy hats and blue jackets had peacefully driven their 2-horse carts laden with wheat and had driven back over the same dam, all dusty with flour, their carts white. Now, on this narrow dam, between wagons and cannon, under horses and between wheels, crowded men disfigured by the fear of death, crushing each other, dying, stepping over the dying, and killing each other, only to go a few steps and be killed themselves just the same.
My name is Austin Davis, and today my reading will be dedicated to my father, Darrell Davis, who served in the United States Navy for 23 years, and to my grandfather, Jim Hillis, who served in the United States Army. I will be reading from the memoir of Andy Rooney, and as a foreword to some of his reflections, I took a piece of his foreword, and this is what this is. For 3 of my 4 years in the Army, I saw the fighting from close up. I can't forget much of what I saw, and I want to write it down. For one thing, writing is a cathartic experience. Once you've put something down on paper, you can dismiss it from your mind. Having told it, I'll be able to forget it. And this next piece will be a reflection by Andy Rooney of the landing on Normandy on D-Day. There have been only a handful of days since the beginning of time on which the direction the world was taking has been changed for the better in one 24-hour period by an act of man. June 6, 1944 was one of them. What the Americans, the British, and the Canadians were trying to do was get back a whole continent that had been taken from its rightful owners and whose citizens had been taken captive by Adolf Hitler's German army. It was one of the most monumentally unselfish things one group of people ever did for another. 40 years after the landing at D-Day, Rooney, in one of his reports, would reflect that they were all my age. I think of the good life I have lived, and they never had the chance to live. They didn't give their lives were taken.
Hi, my name is Remington Harris, and I'm dedicating this to my grandfather, who was a U.S. Vietnam War veteran. Yusef Kuminyaka, facing it. My black face fades, hiding inside the black granite. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No tears. I'm stone. I'm flesh. My clouded reflection eyes me like a bird of prey. The profile of night slanted against the morning. I turn this way. The stone lets me go. I turn that way. I'm inside the Vietnam Veterans Memorial again, depending on the light to make a difference. I go down the 58,022 names, half expecting to find my own in letters like smoke. I touch the name Andrew Johnson. I see the booby-trapped white flash. Names shimmer on a woman's blouse. But when she walks away, the names stay on the wall. Brushstrokes flash. A red bird's wings cutting across my stare. The sky. A plane in the sky. A white vet's image floats closer to me. Then his pale eyes look through mine. I'm a window. He's lost his right arm inside the stone. In the black mirror, a woman's trying to erase names. No, she's brushing a boy's hair.
Hi, my name is Marley Bird, and I will be reading Kate Daniels' poem, War Photograph. A naked child is running along the path toward us, her arms stretched out, her mouth open, the world turned to trash behind her. She is running from the smoke and the soldiers, from the bodies of her mother and little sister thrown down into a ditch, from the blown-up bamboo hut, from the melted pots and pans. And she is also running from the gods who have changed the sky to fire and puddled the earth with skin and blood. She is running, my God, to us, 10,000 miles away, reading the caption beneath her picture in a weekly magazine. All over the country, we're feeling sorry for her and being appalled at the war being fought in the other world. She keeps on running, you know, after the shutter of the camera clicks. She's running to us. For how can she know her feet beating a path on another continent? How can she know what we really are? For from the distance, we look so terribly human.
My name is Georgi Sarashvili, and I'm going to read an excerpt from Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. And I'd like to dedicate this to my grandfather, Richard Gundrum, who served in the U.S. Navy in World War II. Stories can save us. In a story, which is a kind of dreaming, the dead sometimes smile and sit up and return to the world. The thing about a story is, you dream it as you tell it, hoping that others might dream along with you, and in this way, memory and imagination and language combine to make spirits in the head. There is the illusion of aliveness. It's now 1990. When I look at photographs of myself as I was in 1956, I realize that in the important ways, I haven't changed at all. I was Timmy then, and now I'm Tim. Inside the body, or beyond the body, there is something absolute and unchanging. The human life is all one thing, like a blade tracing loops on ice. A little kid, a 23-year-old infantry sergeant, a middle-aged writer now knowing guilt and sorrow. And as a writer now, I want to save Linda's life, not her body, her life. She died, of course. 9 years old and she died. It was a brain tumor. But in the story, I can steal her soul. I can revive, at least briefly, that which is absolute and unchanging. In a story, miracles can happen. Linda can smile and sit up. She can reach out, touch my wrist, and say, "Timmy, stop crying." In the months after Ted Lavender died, there were many other bodies. I climbed a tree and threw down what was left of Kurt Lemon one afternoon. I watched my friend Kiawa sink into the muck along the Song Trebong. And in early July, after a battle in the mountains, I was assigned to a 6-man detail to police up the enemy KIAs. There were 27 bodies altogether and parts of several others. The dead were everywhere. At one point, Mitchell Sanders looked at me and said, "Hey man, I just realized something. Death sucks." Lying in bed at night, I made up elaborate stories to bring Linda alive in my sleep. I invented my own dreams, and soon enough she showed up, and we'd sit on her front steps and stare at the dark and just be together. It was a kind of self-hypnosis, partly willpower, partly faith, which is how stories arrive. But back then it felt like a miracle, and my dreams had become a secret meeting place, and I couldn't wait to fall asleep at night. My mother asked me about it one morning, but I didn't dare tell her the truth. It was embarrassing, I suppose. It was like a precious secret, and I didn't want to lose Linda. She was dead, I understood that, but even as a 9-year-old, I had begun to practice the magic of stories. Some I dreamed up, and others I wrote down. Once, I remember we were ice skating late at night, tracing loops and circles under yellow lights. I asked her what it was like to be dead. She smiled and said, "Do I look dead?" I told her no, she looked terrific, but I waited a moment and then asked her again. "Well, right now, I'm not dead, but when I am, it's like being inside a book that nobody's reading. An old one. It's on a library shelf, so you're safe and everything, but the book hasn't been checked out for a long, long time. All you can do is wait, just hope that somebody will pick it up and start reading." Linda smiled at me. "It's not so bad. This is stupid. Let's go skate some more." So I followed her down to the frozen pond. It was late and nobody else was there, and we held hands and skated almost all night under the yellow lights. And then it becomes 1990. I'm 43 years old and a writer now, and still dreaming Linda alive in exactly the same way. She's not the embodied Linda. She's mostly made up with a new identity and a new name. Her real name doesn't matter. She was 9 years old, I loved her, and then she died. And yet right here, in the spell of memory and imagination, I can still see her as if through the ice, as if I'm gazing into some other world, a place where there are no brain tumors, no funeral homes, where there are no bodies at all. I can see Kiawa too, and Ted Lavender, and Kurt Lemon. And sometimes I can even see Timmy with Linda under the yellow lights. I'm young and happy. I'll never die. I'm skimming across the surface of my own history, moving fast, riding the melt beneath the blades. And when I take a high leap into the dark and come down 30 years later, I realize it is as Tim trying to save Timmy's life with a story.
I served as a civilian attachment to the United States Navy in probably about the time that that story was written, Georgi. We honor the veterans of the United States military and the soldiers of all cultures. May the honoring of these warriors mark the end of violence among all men. My references you'll recognize in part, and they are pretty good, pretty faithful references to these sources. For this to be true, the Lord will judge among the nations and will rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Nation shall not learn war anymore. He will make wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariots with fire. Let the mountains bring peace to the people, and the hills in righteousness. In his days may the righteous flourish. Peace will abound until the moon is no more. He will judge among the nations. He will fill them with corpses. He will shatter the chief men over a broad country. For every boot of the booted warrior in the battle tumult, and every cloak rolled in blood, they will all be for burning, fuel for the fire. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom. He will establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. And the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. And the work of righteousness will be peace, and the service of the righteous will be quietness and confidence forever. Then my people will live in peaceful habitation and in secure dwellings and in undisturbed resting places. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end. I will remove all weapons of war from the land, all swords and bows. And for Bob, I will remove all personnel, artillery shells. I will let my people live in peace and safety, and I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. Thank you.
I was hoping you'd be able to get the microphone up a little bit higher so I wouldn't have to struggle with it. So I'm Dr. Alex Vernon. I teach in the English department here. I served in the 1st and 64th Armored Battalion in the first Iraq War, which is startlingly a quarter of a century ago now. Wow. So I'm going to take a little bit different approach today. The reading I have is from a novel that came out in 2012 by Ben Fountain called Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. Some people describe it as the catch-22 of the Iraq War. It's a little bit irreverent, so and it's funny, I hope. But I think that those of you who know soldiers know that probably irreverence and humor is how they get through their days. So I think it's appropriate anyway. And I'm doing it now also because the premise of the novel is that a squad has been brought back from Iraq, and they are going on Thanksgiving Day to the Cowboys Stadium, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, to be a part of the halftime show with Beyonce dancing around them. And so since we are in the shadow of the football stadium here, I thought it would be an appropriate thing to read. So this is from the perspective of Billy Lynn, the protagonist of the book. The truth of the matter is that boys just want to run around and knock the shit out of each other. Football seemed a constructive outlet for this impulse, and at various times during his youth, Billy played organized ball, organized being the code word for elaborate systems of command and control where every ounce of power resides at the top. It seemed that football must be made to be productive and useful, a net plus benefit for all mankind, hence the endless motivational yawping about teamwork, sacrifice, discipline, and other modern virtues, the basic thrust of which boiled down to shut up and do as you're told. So despite the terrific violence inherent in the game, a weird passivity seeped into your mind. All those rules, all the maxim, all the 3-hour practices where you mostly stood around waiting for your turn to be screamed at by an assistant coach, they produced almost a pleasurable numbness, a general doling of perception and responsiveness. In a way, it was nice, constantly being told what to do, except that after a while it got boring as hell. So to heck with that, he was done with football after his sophomore year, except that the Army is pretty much the same thing. Then he goes to the locker room and meets the Dallas Cowboys players. They are huge. They could be a new species, or throwbacks to some lost prehistoric age when humans the size of Clydesdales roamed the earth. TV's toy soldier scale doesn't do them justice, these blown-up versions of the human frame. Where else but America could football flourish? America with its millions of acres of corn, soy, and wheat, its lakes of dairy, its year-round gushers of fruits and vegetables and such meats, that extraordinary pipeline of beef, poultry, seafood, and pork, feedlot-gorged, vitamin-riched, and hypodermically immunized, humming factories of high velocity, of epic nutrition in this strain of industrial-sized humans. Only America could produce such giants. Any other country would go broke trying to feed these mammoths. These players are so much more martial than any soldier. They are bigger, stronger, thicker, badder. Their truck-sized chins could bulldoze small buildings, and their thighs bulged like load-bearing beams. Testosterone, these guys are cranking it, and their warrior aura ramps up exponentially as they assemble themselves for the game, as if these human mountains needed more bulk. Elaborate systems of shock and awe are constructed about their bodies, arrays of hip pads, thigh pads, knee pads, shoulder pads, high-tech concoctions of foams, fabrics, velcros, interlocking shells, with girdling skirt extensions to cradle mere mortal ribs. Tape for the hands, tape for the wrists, roll pads, elbow pads, pads for the forearm. The top shelf of each locker displays no fewer than 4 pairs of brand new shoes. All this gear, all this stuff depresses Billy further. These players are all business. They're like beasts of burden submitting to the harness for yet another day. How does it all come to be? That's what he wants to know. Not just the how, but the why of all this stuff. Only in America, apparently. Only America could take such a product-intensive sport and grow it into the civic necessity it is today, complete with the national anthem, "O America, O my people." Thank you.
Again, thank you for coming. I really think it's worthwhile to come together, hear these words from many different centuries and cultures and situations, and reflect together on what it means to sacrifice self in military service. Thank you.